Welcome to the FYI on Youth Ministry, a youth ministry podcast from the Fuller Youth Institute. This season is all about the 7 transitions of young adulthood, and in today's episode, we're talking about the acclimating transition. I'm your host, Roslyn Hernandez, and the young adults that we're going to be hearing from today are Seth, Amalia, Laura, Christian, Will, and Faith. But first, here is Steve with an overview of the acclimating transition.
Okay, so today we want to talk about young adults and their acclimating transitions. I think that it would be very simple to call this transition something like moving. Like a young adult moves to a new place and that's a transition. But we actually think it's something much deeper than that. It seems as though acclimating has this idea of somehow developing shallow roots to thrive in the environment that they are a part of. Now, we use this idea of shallow roots because sometimes young adults are trying to find ways to thrive in an environment where they may or may not stay long. Think about the tension that comes with that. I'm a young adult moving to a new space and I don't want to be alone. I want to thrive in the new job I took in a new city or a new place that I moved to. But there's a good chance that I may not stay there long. So there's a tension of developing roots, but recognizing the fact that I may not be there forever. A lot of times acclimating has this sense of moving to a new community of which I choose to be a part. But acclimating also could just be simply moving into a new job where the environment of the job raises new questions about what does it mean for me to be successful here? Who do I need to engage with? How do I behave? What does success look like? Who can I trust? What is the culture associated with that? And this takes a lot of work and attention that young adults need to give if they're truly going to survive and, most importantly, thrive in a new working environment or in a new living environment.
Acclimating transitions can happen multiple times in the lives of young adults. This is just a time in their lives full of movement that takes them to different communities and even parts of the world. Yet the acclimating is not just getting acquainted to a new geographical space. It can also come with an element of social, cultural shock and growth. Let's hear what Seth and Amalia said about this.
The journey of acclimating is specific to my own kind of identity and learning about myself and reflecting on my background. So I grew up in a really, really small town that was very homogenous in the South. And then I got my first job out of college and moved to the Midwest. And I think learning a lot more in college and having some just really valuable experiences really just caused me to, change a lot of my values and views about myself and about how the world works. And so for me, moving to a city, I think in my like church tradition and my faith tradition, and even just in my cultural tradition, like there is a strong fear of cities and of like urban areas. And there's kind of a taboo thing about that. And especially, I mean, a lot of that, to be honest, is coded in racism. When I moved to the city I live in now, I tried to seek out places that would make me uncomfortable or places that I just was not familiar with. Doing that in a way that also doesn't make other people uncomfortable. So if you're going to someone else's neighborhood, being aware of how you're holding that space. So to me, the journey of like acclimating has been really embracing the city I'm in, embracing the neighborhood I'm in, building connections, relationships, partnerships, and habits and patterns in that community, and seeking out places where I'm not going to be the majority voice and where I can just listen and learn. Has been probably the most valuable thing I ever could have done.
I grew up in Southern California in a very diverse community. And then following that, I attended an HBCU, so a historically Black college or university. And so that was an amazing opportunity, best time of my life. And after that, I got a job in a multi-ethnic church in the South. And so that was a lot of figuring out how to acclimate. because a lot of people assumed because I'd been in a multi-ethnic setting before that I would easily be able to transition back after my HBCU experience. But I feel like finding for the first time in my life a safe space and then being pushed out of it again was very traumatizing, especially in the political climate that I found myself in. So I think that was a huge thing that I had to acclimate to. A secondary one that was something I had to acclimate to was also institutional environment. I have always grown up within a city that had a large number of people of my denominational group. After college, I was for the first time in a city that had a very minority group of my denomination. And so that was something else I had to acclimate to. Up until that point, I had not had a large amount of friends that were outside of my denomination. And so that was something else I had to figure out is who am I in this new geographical environment and who am I in this new institutional environment as well. Both of those were really important to how I was processing my young adulthood.
Moving to a completely different and unknown place can be uncomfortable, but moving home can also come with its own acclimating challenges. Like many young adults and other adults, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Laura moved from her college city back to her parents' home. And this is how she acclimated in that transition.
So during the pandemic, like so many people, I had to move back home with my parents. I grew up in California's Central Valley, moved down to LA County for college, and had stayed there. And I honestly tried everything in my power to like not have to move home. And then the pandemic hit, and then I had to move home. I found myself in a familiar environment, but I was completely different. So I like had moved back into my bedroom. It looked the exact same that it was like a time capsule from high school, but I myself felt so different, and that was really disorienting. Like one thing was choosing to redo my bedroom because there was nothing else to do. I was stuck in the house. So I like went through all of my things and like started taking down like the pictures and posters from my wall and like spending time like looking through those memories, but then also like moving forward in let's paint the walls and let's do something else in this room and make this environment reflect um, who I am now, because I just felt like I was being dragged back into like my high school self, but that was no longer who I was. And I also think I had to reconnect with the physical location that I had grown up in, being able to really like connect back with home and feel that like sense of like belonging again, was difficult but really important for me to actively put in effort to try to enjoy where I was and not just be really angsty about it.
If it can be angst inducing to move back home to a familiar place, moving to a completely new place can bring another set of emotions. It can be excitement, but also loss and grief. It can be anticipation, but also isolation, maybe a season of loneliness. This is how Faith is preparing for all of these aspects of her own acclimating transition.
So I am in the middle of this transition. Like right now, I'm moving from the area that I grew up in about 6 weeks. So everything is about to change. I think a couple things have really come to mind. The first is that even though these are transitions that I'm like planning and kind of voluntarily stepping into, there's a lot of grief that has come with them, like saying goodbye to like my childhood home. Even though I haven't lived there for 5 or 6 years, it's still a loss that I won't get to like see it anymore, or the church I grew up in, or even the people. And sometimes in conversations, it feels like people don't fully understand that. Like, oh, are you so excited to move? Like, what are you looking forward to? All of this. And I'm like, I actually feel really sad right now. Like, I want to cry about the things that I'm losing, even though it is good and it's beautiful and it's all going to work out. Like, I'm still really sad about it. And I think one of the things I'm most maybe nervous about in the transition is once I arrive kind of in the new church, in the new environment, is they're going to be so excited that I'm there. And that will be great. But I will also then like that grief process will continue because I will finally have made the move. I think I'm hoping to encounter people who can understand and create some space for me to be able to like do some processing and adjust to the new environments that I'm working in and living in. But I'm kind of preparing myself and expecting it to be somewhat of a lonely and isolating season. Especially too as a single person, I'm jumping in literally by myself and I don't get to go home and process with anybody. Like it's just me and my house plants. So that's it, you know? And like for a lot of other people, they have a spouse or a family that they can process with. And so neither good nor bad, but for me, it's really working on developing a language to be able to articulate and explain that to people because I can't expect them to fully understand my experience. What I can do is help them understand my experience by, explaining it well to them.
And now here is a very practical advice that Seth, Will, Christian, Laura, and Faith have not just for young adults who are going through their own acclimating transitions, but also for youth leaders or other adults that are walking alongside them.
When I'm thinking about acclimating to a new environment, I just feel like I couldn't recommend enough to myself or to other people, just like to be able to dive in head first, to try new things, and connect with people. And to like also, learn about cultures that are different from your own. And to me, that's when I look back at the last 6 years I spent in the city, what's allowed me to call it home is those experiences, not the experiences where I like, okay, where am I most comfortable? Where am I most kind of content, but saying, okay, where can I stretch my comfort zone and maybe find some comfort and friendship along the way? And that's where I've been able to say, okay, this city really is my home by being involved in causes I care about and being in those spaces. So I think it's just an incredibly important journey. And, it's been one of the most important pieces of my story in the last 10 years in my 20s.
I think that one of my biggest pieces of advice for leaders would be try to not lead with fear in your heart. I find that a lot of time whenever we're leading teenagers or young adults or as young adults being led, there's this assumption that we're going to make the worst possible decision that we can, that we're going to choose terrible things at every turn because we long to self-destruct. And that's absolutely not true. And yes, we make mistakes. We don't always make the right decisions. We do things that are silly sometimes. But I think being led by someone who believes the best in you and knows your heart and then is able to communicate that in a way that isn't fear-based, I think is really helpful.
So I had a similar experience to to some things that others have described. And someone told me, hey, it's just so you know, it takes 6 months usually for you to feel any kind of connection and 2 years for a place to feel like home. And sometimes that's true even when you're returning home. While that was really jarring to hear at first, it was helpful. So then 2 months in, when I was still feeling lonely and disconnected, for me to say, this is normal. Like, this isn't me not being able to make connections. There isn't something wrong with me. It takes time. And so just to have like a healthy expectation of that was so helpful and helped me to not be so hard on myself and to keep trying. So like when I came and I tried getting plugged into a community group and it wasn't the right fit of people, I didn't feel like I had to be in this desperate state of I'm going to stick with them even though it's not the right relationships because I just am so desperate for people. I was able to release that and say, let's try something new. It's going to take some time and I'm going to be willing to give it the time that it needs to find and build healthy community and new relationships and get acclimated. And just giving myself the permission of the time that it takes to do that was so necessary for me.
I would encourage leaders to get really practical and think about like, what do you do for work? Where do you live? Like, can you make a list of your favorite restaurants for that new person, like for that new young adult that's coming to town? Can you can you go around to like local businesses and like ask for them to like donate a few things for your young adult group, like new guest like bag or something like that? I think the interpersonal is so important, but also like young adults really need practical help, and oftentimes that's overlooked. Um, be, because the interpersonal seems, especially to ministry leaders, that's like the biggest thing that they think about. But practical needs are just as important, especially for young adults.
I love that you said that, Laura, because that's been the thing that I'm like most worried about moving in this transition for me is like, where's the grocery store? And like, how do I like get the things that I need? But it reminds me of a couple years ago, I had a staff member who moved from Florida to join my staff, my young adult staff at the church I was at. And I'm like up in the northern part of the country. And so we get a lot of snow, and he had never seen snow before. And so I bought him an ice scraper for his car. And that was like part of his like welcome gift to the church staff was like an ice scraper. And he like, every time he used it, he would like send me a picture and be like, thank you so much. Like, I'm so glad I have this ice scraper. I would have never thought to like buy an ice scraper for my car. So I think stuff like that, it can feel really small, but that's a way that we're like really helping young people acclimate to the new areas that they're in. And so I think that's huge.
That made me think of something that maybe doesn't apply to every context, but so where I'm from, it's a university town, and we have a couple of really large tech companies that intentionally recruit fresh undergrads. And so we have seasons where we know there's a lot of new people that are coming into our church, that are coming into our city. And so I really appreciate that our community is so mindful of that we know in the summer we're going to have a lot of fresh 22-year-olds who are starting their first job, and we're just aware and we're speaking to them and we're providing opportunities for them to connect, knowing there's a ton of new people who are just looking to make their first friend. And so we make sure that we have community groups available for them. We make sure that we have opportunities for them to connect casually, and we do those kinds of things. If you're in a context where you have those rhythms, be aware of those rhythms, and then provide opportunities that lean into the reality of the season of the community that you're in.
So I remember starting at my new first job out of graduation with like a nonprofit, and just how difficult that can be. Often being like the youngest person on staff, right? Or not knowing how to relate. One of the things that's been huge is, as much as I can, even with sometimes like the social anxiety that it comes with, like taking initiative, introducing yourself to someone, even if it's awkward, it really has gone a long way. Like now I feel like I have good relationships with all the staff that I work with. And I think similarly, like with being a young adult, I often felt like new to my city, I felt like I needed or wanted that community. So my outlook was just to go about creating it. So it's like, man, I miss having game nights with my friends in college. I'm going to do a game night at my house, and maybe 2 people come the first time. But now we've got a group and we have games that we like. And so this is what we do. And then we bring other people into that. Like really taking that step of initiative to shake somebody's hand at your new company, or to invite someone over to your house, even if your house is not impressive and you don't have cool furniture or whatever.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Seth, and super resonate with it. And I just wanted to highlight something that you said really quickly at the beginning, but like thinking about the people who might feel out of place. So it might not even just be like new to the location, but like, are they the only woman on the staff team or in the community? Are they the only single person? Are they the person without kids? Are they like the only person of color? Like any of those things that might make someone feel excluded or might make someone feel like an outsider. I think just as believers, like part of embodying the gospel is moving towards people who might feel like they're on the fringes or might be on the fringes, and how can we move towards them and welcome them in the most like warm, again, just embodiment of the gospel way that we can.
There's a theme coming up for me of like sometimes adults need to just ask. Like, what do you need right now? What is it that you're thinking about? How can I help you? Like say that someone's moving away, right? Like Faith, like there might be an adult who has been to where you're moving, or like knows people where you're moving. Like if they just asked, like, what are your worries right now? Yeah, anything like that coming up for any of you? How just asking or opening up the space can be helpful?
Yeah, I really think it's a both and. It's asking and listening, and also like jumping in and helping, because while I do want to be heard and like do feel like I have specific things that I need or I'm worried about and would love to have somebody hear me on, it's also a really overwhelming process. And so there are some times where I'm like, somebody just do it for me, or like figure it out, or invite me over, or feed me, you know? And so I think as a youth leader, it is a delicate balance, and you're probably not going to get it right like either way all the time. But I think it can be both. It can be like, how do I step up and just like provide something in the life of this young person who's experiencing the transition, while also being open to like hearing their input, asking questions, and showing up in a way that they want me to. But I do kind of think it's a both and I think young people need both.
Yeah, and I think there's power in the follow-up. It's like right at the beginning of a transition, sometimes there's a lot of attention and focus, and then 2 weeks out or 2 months out or 4 months out, like the number of people who are checking in with you just rapidly declines. And so if you can be one of those people in a young person's life that's even if it's like setting a literal calendar reminder to follow up with them every couple of weeks or every couple of months, they don't need to know that that's the rhythm, but they might not know what they need 1 week into the transition, but they might need something 3 months down the line. And if you're the person that's connecting with them at that point, that's going to be so meaningful to them to know that you're still thinking about them.
Hey, so I'm back to tell you, if you're really liking the content that you're hearing in this season, we want to hook you up with a really helpful resource. It's a guide titled 7 Things You Need to Know for Successful Young Adult Ministry. This guide covers the transitions that we're talking about in the season, but it also gives you practical questions to help you engage young adults. You can download this guide at youngadultministrynext.com. I mean, you don't have to go right now, but you could. But do come back. Like, make sure you come back after you get it, because you want to hear the next part. Now let's go to our wrap-up conversation with Steve. All right, here we are at the wrap-up conversation for the acclimating transition.
Yeah.
So what else came up in the research about acclimating that we might not have heard from the young adults right now?
I think what we found was that young adults were really sort of thinking about like, well, how do I establish roots knowing full well that I may not be here forever? So I think really appreciating this tension is really, really important, because young adults want roots, but they also don't like want to go so deep that when they get ripped out, it really hurts.
Yeah.
Right? Because saying goodbye is hard, right?
There's a loss.
Yeah, there's a loss. Right. I think that what we learned from our interviews and others is that I think sometimes, especially with faith communities, there's a real disappointment from young adults, because churches in particular sort of have this idea, like, if you come to our church, you are here forever. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe you've had this experience. I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I have one. Like, if you sign up for a small group, does it sometimes feel like you've like signed your name in blood? Like, everybody knows how to enter a small group. Nobody knows how to leave it, right? And I think that this is problematic, because then I think what young adults do is they're like, there's too much commitment here. So we have to find this balance of shallow roots. I had another ministry leader, God bless them. They're like, we are bringing young adults into our church. And I'm like, fantastic. They're like, we're putting them on the elder board, and we're going to treat them like everybody else. I'm like, great. They're like, so this is a 5-year commitment to be on the elder board. I said, I don't think that's going to work. I said, I love the impulse that you have of wanting to treat young adults like adults and everybody else. But because of the acclimating transition, they can't commit that long. So is there room in your thinking to still allow them to be a part of the elder board or deacons board or whatever, but to have a more manageable time frame? Like, could you do 6 months? Could you do a year? What would that look like? It's recognizing the fact that they're here, but they may not be here forever. So how do we create the sense of home for them without feeling like you have to be here forever or we're not interested in you? The downside of this, and we talk with a lot of leaders about this as well, is that it doesn't seem like for an adult, this sounds really bad, but it doesn't really seem like a very good investment. You know what I mean? Like, what's the payoff if they're not here very long? Well, the payoff is the gospel. The payoff is that 6 months is beautiful time that we can count as something of an encounter with the other, which is where Jesus is.
Right.
And I actually think perhaps that's what young adults are looking for as they think about this acclimating. Is this a space that helps me develop some sense of connection while I'm here that contributes to the long term, but it just may not be here, right? And so I think that's a different mindset. I think part of that is an acclimating transition. Can I be content with where I'm at? Knowing full well that there will always be other options, but how do I live well right where I am now? And that's the invitation, I think, for young adults. Like, be present here with us now. We don't expect you to be here forever, but while you're here, be here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that could be really good news, because it's almost like saying, hey, when you're here, you're at home. Like, we're not your forever home, but it's okay. Like, you be part of this now for what it can be. And I think that's for churches. I think it's also for organizations as well. I think young adults reported a lot of this idea of, like, when I step into a new organization, like, what does it mean to me to succeed here? They're trying to navigate it and find that. So if we can say, this is what it means to be successful here, and we're going to help you for however long that is, that can be such a contributing factor to their development that can be so helpful as well.
That's so good. And something that you mentioned just now is, what does it mean to be successful here? Because I think a lot of the times churches might not know that or might not express that clearly. And then there's that, like, what you talk about, right? That, like, relationship talk.
Yeah.
Is the church thinks they want some kind of relationship, and that they're telling the young adults what that relationship is.
Yeah.
And the young adults think that they know what they want from the church, but it's not the same thing.
Right.
And so they can't acclimate properly because they don't know what it is.
I appreciate you bringing that up. Boy, I talked about that a while ago. I appreciate you saying that. So the relationship thing, this whole defining the relationship, right? I feel like leaders and young adults would do better if they would have a conversation to say, here's what you can expect from me, and here's what you can expect from me. And together, let's make this a winning relationship, rather than making assumptions about each other and then getting mad or frustrated, right?
Or not stating what you're looking for or expecting, and then getting frustrated because they're not meeting those expectations.
The number of times I've heard ministries tell me what they're doing with young adults, and then I've asked them, like, have you talked with young adults about this? And they've said no. And again, it's good intention.
Yes, right.
But I think that what I'm proud about with our research at FYI with young adults is that we've invited them into the whole process. So we're not talking about them and they're off to the side. They've been front and center with this podcast and all the other work that we've done. And I think that's really, really crucial for this to actually work.
That's great. Yeah. I'm going to head us over into the tips or advice. And I'm going to start with something that is kind of coming over for me from the conversation that the young adults had.
Yeah.
In this wrap-up conversation, we went kind of more into the church, like, and community type of it. But they really talked about the practical things. So if they're moving to a church, if they're moving somewhere because of school, if they are changing jobs, if they're moving to a different place and there's already a church that knows that they're coming, what are the practical things that you can be aware of, that you can prepare them for, that you can say, hey, here's a little care package for when you arrive, or like a housewarming package or something like that, helping these young adults prepare and acclimate. It's already touching, like, relational transition. It's touching the acclimating. It's touching the responsibility transition, and many others that if you just think ahead a little bit, you're already helping them, guide them as they're coming into that transition or going through it.
I think that's brilliant advice, and I don't even think I can add to it. But maybe concurrently, maybe for those young adults that are listening out there, if you happen to be listening in on this, which I think there's probably a lot of you, I think the impulse oftentimes for young adults is, because you don't know if you're going to be around for a long time, is to actually try to do it all on your own, or to not do any roots because you think you're going to move on. I totally get it. I mean, I know why you feel that way. to all of you, I would just encourage you to take a risk, to make a connection. It's never a wasted connection. And I think it's really, really important for your own sense of acclimating in this world to recognize the fact that as a pilgrim in this world, there's still these signposts and these connections along the way that I think are really, really good for you and good for the communities that you connect with. Like, communities need you. Even for the short amount of time, it can be a gift. And so I just want to encourage you to do that as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for this.
So good.
Yeah, and thank you all for watching this episode. We hope this was helpful. And remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification button so that you can know when there is a new episode dropping by. And you can listen to it right away, right? Who wouldn't want to?
And over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Send it to your friends, send it to your grandparents, your parents, anyone who would be able to learn something or for whom it might be helpful. And yeah, thanks so much for watching.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. This podcast is one of the many free resources produced by the Fuller Youth Institute. Check out the show notes for links to all of the resources mentioned in today's episode. And if you want to not just listen, but also watch this podcast, you can go find us on the Fuller Youth Institute YouTube channel. Thanks so much for listening or watching.